Hey guys, Mosa here, and today I'm bringing you my Week 12 NFL Power Rankings. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Now, let's kick it off with the Jacksonville Jaguars, dead last, 2-9, just took a L from the Detroit Lions in Ford Field and will start their bye week this week. Now, when it comes to the Jacksonville Jaguars, I honestly think that they, along with a bunch of other teams, are definitely in contention for the number one overall pick. And honestly, I can't even come to think which one it'll be. Jacksonville's obviously the closest, having the worst record in the league. But that still doesn't mean that they are entirely the worst team. They are currently the worst team in my opinion, but things can change. And for right now, from what I saw against Detroit, I think that Doug Peterson should be fired 100%. Now moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders at 2-8, just took an L from the Dolphins and will take on the Broncos at home. Now when it comes to the Las Vegas Raiders, I believe that they need to fire Antonio Pierce. Although, at the end of the year, this team was a lot better with Rich Bisaccia at head coach. And if any interim head coach was supposed to take that role as head coach, it was definitely him. And this team, needs a quarterback. They need to rebuild this team. Honestly, this team is not going anywhere with this current squad. And to be honest, we might be seeing Shadur Sanders in a Raiders uniform next year. Now, moving on to the Chicago Bears at 4-6, just took an L from the Green Bay Packers at home and will take on the Vikings at home. Now, when it comes to the Chicago Bears, obviously not a good season for Caleb Williams. I think that, though, Rome Odunze has been doing pretty decent. Not the expert type wide receiver he should be, but I mean, they're just in the rookie years, so they still have a long ways to go, so I'm still expecting more from them. But this Bears team, even though they still have a shot, honestly, I don't expect these teams to be fighting for the playoffs. They're most likely going to be a team in the middle of the pack when it comes to the draft. And yeah, this team, although is not yet good, will be in the future. Now, on to the New England Patriots at 3-8. Just took an L from the Rams and will take on the Dolphins at Miami. This team, honestly, Drake May is an okay quarterback. He's still a rookie, so it's not really on him. He's in a horrible situation with New England, but pretty soon, if the New England Patriots play their cards right, I think he could be one of the top quarterbacks depending on how they build their team this offseason, both in the draft and in free agency. And realistically, the Patriots need a lot of redoing in that really the offense and the defense. But I think start protecting your quarterback is the first thing they should do. Now moving on to the New York Giants at 2-8, just came off a bye and will take on the Buccaneers in New York. Now when it comes to the New York Giants, I honestly think even though they benched the quarterback Daniel Jones, I think replacing him with Tommy DeVito is not the best scenario ever. I think that they should indeed swap Daniel Jones, but give Drew Lock a chance. I think Drew Lock deserves a chance. I mean, DeVito as well. He was pretty good when coming in for an injured Daniel Jones, but still, I think give the chance to Drew Lock first, and then if Drew Lock is a failure, then you swap over to DeVito, which honestly would be 50-50. Same goes with Locke, but to be honest, I would have preferred Locke over DeVito. Now on to the Tennessee Titans, who are at 2-8. Just took an L from the Vikings and will take on the Houston Texans in Houston. The Titans are one of the worst teams in the league, contenders for the number one overall pick, and to be honest, they don't got a quarterback. Honestly, Mason Rudolph, terrible. Will Levis, terrible. There's no way either of them are going to be the future of the Tennessee Titans. So most likely that next draft they get someone like, depending on if they get the first overall pick, Shadur Sanders, or maybe even Carson Beck, or Quinn Ewers. You never know. But in the end, I think the Tennessee Titans will definitely have to rebuild. And honestly, they got to start getting some good offensive linemen. They got a good defense, and they got to get all these guys, make sure every piece is good and that every piece is ready for the NFL season and a run for the Super Bowl. Now on to the Carolina Panthers at 3-7, coming off a bye, and will take on the now 9-1 Kansas City Chiefs. Now, to be honest, I'm not expecting anything from Carolina going up against the Chiefs, but other than that, Bryce Young most likely is their future, although I do believe that they need to make him learn everything, make sure he's in the right situation, make sure in this offseason that they get him not only protection, even though he has one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, but also they need to get him a good defense. They need to start building up everything so that in the future, Bryce Young can lead the Panthers all the way to the NFC's championship game or even the Super Bowl. Now, up next, we got the Dallas Cowboys at 3-7. They just took a massive L on Monday Night Football to the Texans and will take on the Commanders. Now, when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys, it's over. Season's done. Jerry Jones, you failed for the 2024 season. You were not just ready for the season. You weren't getting everyone you wanted. You were getting everyone you thought you needed. And guess what? Turned out to be a failure. And now your team is 3-7 and most likely out of the playoffs. Unless you manage to win, for some reason, 7 consecutive games. Other than that, I don't think the Cowboys are going anywhere, and they're going to have to start their rebuild this offseason, which does not mean getting rid of Mike McCarthy, but that could be a start. Now, moving on to the Cleveland Browns at 2-8, and they just took an L from the New Orleans Saints and will take on the Steelers on Thursday night. Now, the Cleveland Browns are honestly doing not good, obviously, but not too bad after the Deshaun Watson injury, which in my opinion is still the best thing that has happened for the Browns in 2024. Other than that, honestly, I think that the Browns should indeed get a new quarterback, although they won't. Obviously, they're stuck with Watson until either something happens that, lets him get out of the contract. Otherwise, this team is going to have to build this team good enough for even Deshaun Watson to actually do something with it. Now, moving on to the New York Jets at 3-8. They just took an L from the Indianapolis Colts and will enter their bye week. Now, when it comes to the Jets, honestly, this team ain't going anywhere. And most likely, they're not going to end 9-8. They're going to end up with a losing record. And we're probably going to be seeing next week or the week after that, depending on whenever the Jets are eliminated from playoff contention, that we're going to be seeing the New York Football Jets lose their quarterback, not to injury, but because he ain't going to play, just like he didn't play in Green Bay every time they were eliminated from playoff contention. Now, moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 4-6, just came off a bye and will take on the New York Giants in New York. Now, when it comes to the Buccaneers, they're just coming off a bye, so they're all good. They're most likely going to win against the Giants, and to be honest, this game is an easy game for the Buccaneers because, to be honest, you're all refreshed from a bye, and there's one of two things that could happen. Crap game, you lose to a horrible team, or you win against a horrible team, and you keep up trying to get back into the game against the Atlanta Falcons for that division title. Although it is really hard to do that. But in the end, I do in fact believe that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are not out of it yet for the NFC South title. Up next, we got the New Orleans Saints at 4-7, just took a win from the Cleveland Browns and are entering their bye week. Now, when it comes to the New Orleans Saints, they surprised me. And to be honest, I never expected Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints to take that win from Cleveland. But it happened, and to be honest, it was kind of good. Doesn't mean that they're going to make the playoffs or anything, but that just means that they're getting closer and closer. But I still do not believe that they are a playoff team, and they must rebuild this team 100%, especially after they fired Dennis Allen as their head coach. Now, moving on to the Atlanta Falcons, 6-5, just took an L from the Broncos and are entering their bye week. Now, when it comes to the Falcons, to be honest, like they are a good team that is honestly losing to good teams or decent teams, but honestly, they are going down in the ranks for me because of how weak they are getting and how strong the other teams in the division are getting. And to be honest, the Falcons cannot afford that. They need this NFC South title in order to make the playoffs, and I don't see them making the playoffs if they actually lose the NFC South. Otherwise, to be honest, this team could either be one and done in the playoffs or not even make it. Now, moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals, who are 4-7, just took an L from the LA Chargers on Sunday Night Football and are entering their bye week. Now, this Bengals team, obviously not a playoff contender. Same with Cleveland. It's between the Ravens and Steelers. But when it comes to this team, they are just on a downturn right now. But as long as they're able to do well in the upcoming seasons, I believe them to be a playoff team. Hence why I'm keeping them so high still. But they are going down in my ranks now due to their losses. And to be honest, if they keep losing, they might actually rival for that first overall pick or in the top 5. Now, moving on to the Denver Broncos, 6-5, took down the Falcons and are taking on the Raiders in Las Vegas. Now, this team, obviously against Las Vegas, they're pretty good. They're most likely going to win. But to be honest, this team is actually a playoff contender still, obviously having a winning record, but not as a division champion. I still think that goes to Kansas City. But otherwise, this team is a potential wildcard team, top wildcard team, depending on how well they can do with their rookie quarterback. Obviously, Bo Nix has been doing pretty well. And yeah, there's absolutely nothing I have against the Broncos right now. They're doing pretty well, and they might actually be that good now. Now on to the Indianapolis Colts at 5-6, just took a win from the Jets and will take on the Lions in Detroit. Now, don't expect a win from the Colts against the Lions. I don't think that's going to be a trap game for the Lions. They are going to win. But when it comes to the Colts, they need to really progress with Anthony Richardson, as he is a quarterback that is not ready for the NFL. And Joe Flacco, obviously not the guy either. And potentially he could be a mentor to him, obviously, but even though they don't have the same skill set, I think that Joe Flacco's experience could still instill something into Anthony Richardson in order for him to be a great quarterback. But for right now, I'm thinking the Colts need a little bit more of their project quarterback to be actually good. So give him a little bit longer to progress. Now moving on to the LA Rams at 5-5. They just took down the Patriots in Foxborough and will take on the Eagles at home on Sunday Night Football. Now, when it comes to the Los Angeles Rams, they are pretty good and still not good enough. And we've seen this as both them, the Seahawks, and the 49ers, all three of them are tied. And the Cardinals are just one game ahead of all of them. And this is going to be a tough game for the Rams. But an upset could happen. That is definitely a possibility. But do I expect it? Not really. But it would be amazing to see the Rams honestly take down the Eagles. Well, not for me, but for other people, specifically Rams fans, that would be amazing. But for me, I'd honestly prefer they lose so that we, the Seattle Seahawks, could get ahead. Now, moving on to the Miami Dolphins, just took down the Raiders and will take on the Patriots at home. Now, when it comes to the Dolphins, they are on the rise, but they have been facing terrible teams, so not really going to give them the benefit of the doubt yet. Although, another horrible team, maybe at 5-6 record, but still have this team not making the playoffs. They are definitely not in contention, in my opinion. No one is, to be honest. The Bills most likely will win that division outright, but the Dolphins do have a shot at the playoffs, at least via a wild card. But It all really depends if they can keep going. Now, moving on to my Seattle Seahawks at 5-5, took down the 49ers in Levi Stadium and will take on the Cardinals at home. Now, when it comes to the Seahawks, we have a very big opportunity here with a loss of both the 49ers and the Rams. And then after that, if not only that we beat the Cardinals, we're the number one team in the NFC West again. And that's something I'm very much looking forward to if Seattle does so, because to be honest, I think Seattle could actually take down the Arizona Cardinals, although it would be a very tough game, and the Seahawks would be at a big disadvantage, even though they have the home field advantage of the 12th man. Now, moving on to the Washington Commanders at 7-4, got taken down on Thursday Night Football by the Eagles, and are now facing off against the Cowboys. Easy win for the Commanders, but still, is it good enough to get back at the Eagles? And I believe no, it is far too late. I believe that Philly, even though both teams still have an opportunity, will have the opportunity to win out the division over the Washington Commanders. This is an easy win for the Commanders, though, so there's no doubt in my mind that the Cowboys will indeed lose, and that we'll be seeing the Commanders at 8-4. Now, moving on to the San Francisco 49ers, 5-5, just took an L from my Seattle Seahawks and will take on the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau Field. Now, when it comes to the 49ers, I do expect them to give a good fight to the Green Bay Packers, just like they did to us in their home stadium, by the way. But still, I still think the 49ers are a good team that might make the playoffs, although this is starting to become an even more interesting division in the NFC West due to the fact that so many unpredicted things like the Cardinals being good and the 49ers dropping, these are some things that I had never expected, but now we're getting them. Now, moving on to the Arizona Cardinals, 6-4, coming off a bye, will take on my Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. Now, when it comes to the Arizona Cardinals, I in fact believe that the Arizona Cardinals will 100% be a very good team that makes the playoffs. But I did not expect that at the beginning of the season. I expected these guys to be dead last, battling for that number one number one overall pick. And right now, they're battling for that NFC West title and could potentially get it. It all really depends on how they do against my Seahawks and if the rest of the division follows suit and loses. Because there is no way that the Cardinals will win if they are at least one game ahead of each team, because at any point, any of those teams can surpass them easily. Now on to the Houston Texans at 7-4. They are honestly just amazingly beating the Cowboys last Monday night. To be honest, that was expected. And the Titans are their next opponent at home. When it comes to the Houston Texans, these guys are on point. But they did just beat a horrible team, so it's honestly not that big of a deal. But still, a win is a win. And they are honestly still on top in that division and will most likely stay on top in the AFC South for the time to come and most likely win the division outright. Now, moving on to the Minnesota Vikings, 8-2, just took a win from the Titans and will take on the Bears in Chicago. Now, when it comes to the Minnesota Vikings, I honestly believe that the Vikings 100%, this team will 100% win the NFC North. If not, it'll be Detroit. Now, you're probably wondering, why do I believe an 8-2 team will beat a 9-1 team? Well, there's a reason for that. And I believe comeback. I think that we'll be seeing the Vikings come back and all of a sudden the Lions start losing games. Not saying that they won't make the playoffs, but still, I think that both teams will make the playoffs, and we'll be seeing the Vikings, probably the number 2-3 seed, while the number 5 seed will most likely be the Detroit Lions, and we'll be seeing both of them explode. Although, I think that the Vikings will most likely be a one and done scenario while the Lions move on. Now, moving on to the Baltimore Ravens, 7-4, took an L from the Pittsburgh Steelers and will take on the Chargers on Monday night. Now, when it comes to the Baltimore Ravens, they are pretty good, but honestly, Pittsburgh has proven to be the better team, but I still think it's a tight race. It's going to come up in between the two. It's going to be one or the other, 2-3 seed for either of the two teams, while the other makes it in as a wild card. But in the end, I think that the Ravens have a very good shot of overpassing the Steelers in the later part of the year, most likely in Week 18. Now, moving on to the LA Chargers, 7-3, took a win from the Bengals and will take on the Baltimore Ravens on Monday night. Now, when it comes to this team, the Chargers are now playing on back-to-back games, Sunday night against the Bengals, Monday night against the Ravens. But this team has been doing outstandingly, although they did beat the Bengals and honestly still had a chance to lose it. I think that this time they'll actually lose it. And I think that they'll make mistakes. They are a good team, but at times their mistakes cost them heavily. And I think this is going to be one of those games where the Chargers just horrifically lose this game to the Baltimore Ravens. Now, moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles, 8-2, took a win from the Commanders on Thursday night. Now we'll take on the Rams on Sunday night. Now, when it comes to the Eagles, 8-2 against the 5-5 Rams, this team could be able to beat the Rams. But to be honest, the Rams are on a good note. They're on a high note. And I think that this team might actually be a team to actually give the Eagles a trap game. And this honestly makes it a little bit tougher for the Eagles to win the division. But even though I believe they still will, I still believe that the Philadelphia Eagles will 100% have issues throughout the year and most likely will be out in the divisional round when they make the playoffs. Now, moving on to the Green Bay Packers, 7-3, took a win from the Bears and will take on the 49ers in San Francisco. At home. And then we're going to see this team, Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, they're going to be facing off against each other. But I still think that this team is not as good as their record says. I think that they're going to start stumbling. I think that they're going to start tumbling. And I think that the Green Bay Packers will start to lose this season after this game against the 49ers at home, although making the playoffs most likely as a 7 seed once again. Now, in the top 4, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers, 8-2, just came up with a win against the Ravens, and will take on the Browns on Thursday night. Now, when it comes to the Steelers, this team is on a rise, and it's really in between them and Baltimore for the division. I honestly believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers have a shot at both the playoffs and the division, but just don't imagine that they're actually going to win the Super Bowl, maybe an AFC title appearance, but that's as far as they go. Because I don't believe in the Steelers that much to have an opportunity in the postseason and in the Super Bowl. Like any other part of the playoffs, sure. Super Bowl, there's no way. This team is built very well, but I think that they're not good enough to make it into the Super Bowl. Now, kicking off the top 3, we got the 9-2 Buffalo Bills, who just gave the Kansas City Chiefs their very first loss of the season and will be entering their bye week. These guys are entering their bye week happy and just energetic. The fact that they were the ones to give the Chiefs, the defending Super Bowl champions, who could have gone this season undefeated, their first loss of the year. And to be honest, it's a good thing to be a Buffalo Bills fan right now, but that doesn't mean that it's over yet. Obviously, you got to keep going after this bye week they have and just keep rolling. Now moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs, we got them at 9-1, took an L, their first one from the Buffalo Bills, and now we'll take on the Panthers. Easy win against the Panthers, but just devastating loss to the Buffalo Bills. Although that won't change their resolve. They'll still be a great team that most likely will make it to the AFC Championship and potentially even the Super Bowl to potentially be the first ever NFL team to ever three-peat in history, at least in the Super Bowl era, because obviously there have been three-peats in the past when it was the NFL Championship game, and now we're probably seeing the first one in the Super Bowl era. Now here we have the true number one overall team, and that is the Detroit Lions. 9-1, took down the Jaguars easily, and are now taking on the Colts in Indy. Now when it comes to the Lions, I'm going to be honest. This team is better than the Chiefs. The Chiefs have been terrible throughout the year, and to be honest, have only been number one due to the fact that they had no losses. Their defense was good enough to give them the losses, and their offense was good enough to just simply win the games. But yeah, in my fairest opinion, the Lions are clearly the number one team, but maybe that won't be for long if the Vikings have anything to say about it. Now, that was it for this video. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. I want you to go ahead and tell me who do you think should be higher and who do you think should be lower. Tell me down in the comments below. Now, like this video if you liked it, subscribe, and hit the notification if you want more videos, and I'll see you guys next time.